which is this very
Absolutely. But life has done that. There's every environment on this planet has life, whether it's in the volcano vent or whether it's a mile or two in the ice in Antarctica. There's life from there to there, and it's everywhere. Life has a tendency to fill in the space. It's awareness and consciousness, and this is why this intelligence of the system and the hierarchy of putting the community together to enhance this intelligence of the system. I mean, very interesting. There was a study, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, about technology. Human technology got off the ground about 30,000 years ago. That before that so-called 30,000, they would look back at digs and look at, where Stone Age people lived, and they found the same tools for 100,000 years. And then about 30,000 years ago, things showed up, a wheel and a plow. And I go, well, it was real interesting because when it turned up, at first those new technologies altered things, but they lasted a long time. The hand plow was hundreds of years. But what happened was if you would look at the growth of our technology, 100,000 years, flat, 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 flat. And then about 30,000 years ago started to go. And at this point, it's almost a vertical line. And interesting point, because the conventional thinking was, well, what happened 30,000 years ago where technology came in? And there were two conventional answers. One, there was a change in genetics. Two, there was a change in brain structure, which created a new function. So they go back and they try to track it down, but it was neither of those. It turns out it was density of population. That if it was just you and I having a conversation as cave people around the fire, and I said, you see that moon? I'd like to go there. Maybe we should build a rocket ship. And you go, what's a rocket ship? And there already we got a problem. The reality is with just a couple of people around the campfire, I'm not going to take an idea and do anything with it. But as you get thousands of people around, and one person has this idea, and another person has this idea, and they come together, it's like, whoa. So for example, how many different individual discoveries were required to make a computer? And the answer is 50,000 individuals had to come up with some small idea that when collectively put together could create that. 50,000 people. Well, you go back 30,000 years ago, and obviously there were not very dense, large populations, so there was a slow trajectory of technology. But in today's, the connectivity of today's world and all that, technology is changing in 24 hours. And that is a result of group thinking. And a process called emergence in quantum physics says you'll never can predict what's going to come out of these parts that are appearing right now. You can't predict that. So we're facing this future where a lot of stuff can happen and still not predictable.
Now, your answer as to what happened 30,000 years ago is much more collaborative and less competitively oriented than the standard historical narrative, which typically says when population density started to get high relative to the natural resources, people migrated. And so they avoided each other via migration. Once they had migrated everywhere and there was nowhere else to go, then they had to start competing militarily. And that's what actually drove the development of technology, was the need to actually have force projection advantage over others that had force projection. And so tools were growing military first. I'm sure it was both. But
I'm sure it is too, Daniel. Let me just add this to your story, because this is true. And what's very interesting is the further north or south you go from the equator, the more the technology evolved. And the simple reason is this: you don't need technology in the equator. The stuff's growing on the trees. You don't have to do anything. Just pick it. Okay? But as you start to get into temperate climates where there are winter and growing seasons, and how are you going to protect yourself and what are you going to eat, all of a sudden it required a lot more adaptiveness to the environment, which was learning.
Yeah.
And that's where the separation of why the tropical countries they didn't need this technology. The technology was a result of need. I got to survive in the ice. What the hell am I going to do? So yeah, that's a big part of the evolution, is to recognize if the environment is not hospitable,
right, as
it is in the ecosystem of the equator, then you must have a technology to survive in that environment. And that was a good driver of technology. But I
As
also
you
agree
said,
with you that it was competitive,
right.
and that was a destructive character. So one positive, one negative.
It's competitive and collaborative, right? It would end up being the competition of tribes against tribes rather than people against people. So it was your ability to collaborate with an in-group against an out-group that ended up being the selection criteria.
Absolutely, and it changed the whole dynamic of everything, and it also changed the meaning of competition, because as I write in my book, the original term competition, which has been bastardized, the original term competition meant to strive together. That meant, like, I was a player of tennis, which I'm not, and I wanted to better my game. I'm not going to play with a weaker player because I'm not going to gain any, ability over that. So I will compete, but we're striving together. Why? Because they're trying to improve their game. I'm trying to improve my game. I'm not trying to kill them, and they're not trying to kill me. So the original competition had nothing about that antagonism in it, but it had everything about if we work together, we can get there faster. And like Elon Musk, who is one of my heroes of today, look, he took his company plans and he opened it up to, these are the patents. Here, take a look at my patents. You can have that. You want to use them? Go ahead and use them. It's like, that is new thinking, new business, new corporations, conscious business. Because he knew damn well, if other people make improvements, his car is still going to be, leading the whole thing, because he'll add whatever he needs when somebody else adds that. So basically, the idea of keeping a secret, which is the old version, I compete against you, and if I drive you out of business, good for me. In this case, is no. If other people make electric cars, his business is better. But they're still competitors.
To watch the full episode or to subscribe to the podcast, click the link in the description or visit us at neurohacker.com/collective insights.